Welcome to another Manni Minute Tips. Manni Minute Tips is here to give you Excel knowledge, give you some of my acquired Excel skills over the last number of years. Recap on last few videos, we talked about we talked about relative and absolute cell references. We talked about sum if, sum ifs. We talked about count if and count ifs. If you have not checked out those videos, make sure you watch those, like, comment on them, and subscribe so that you can get sent more of my content. Right, so in this video, we will be looking at Vlookup and XLOOKUP. And then there will be another version of the Vlookup just to look at the tips around VLOOKUPs. I didn't actually know that there are so many things that VLOOKUPs could do, but you'll be surprised how much stuff you can do with VLOOKUP. So I've got the tips to show you. So the next video, we're going to be looking at VLOOKUP tips. So let's get into VLOOKUP. So VLOOKUP is actually a very good function. VLOOKUP, as the name implies, is vertical lookup, right? So you're looking up vertically from the first column, which is the column in which you want to match. And then you're looking up to the right of that to find where the value sits in other columns. So it looks up vertically from left to right. Vlookup provides you approximate. You can have approximate matching, or you can have exact matching, as well as some partial matches, wildcards, or for partial matches, and which we're going to go through in details in the next. Let's get into the Vlookup formula itself. I'll stop rambling on and let's get into the formula itself. So you're being given that set of data. So you're being given just the ID. So I've been given ID and I want to find out the first, last name and email address for this person. This is my database, right, of all the employees within the company. And I'm just interested in that name, right? So instead of spending time looking, I could just easily do a VLOOKUP formula that will allow me to easily get that name, right? So as I said, your VLOOKUP value is that, right? So what we'll do is, first of all, we're going to start counting, start doing our column count, right? So from that VLOOKUP value, this will be my first table, my first column of the table. So I'm going to put 1 there. That's number 1. Then my second count will be number 2, number 3, number 4. You'll see why that's very important in a minute. Formula. If you start typing VLOOKUP, open bracket, the first thing you're going to be asked for is the lookup value. The lookup value you've been given as an employee ID or ID. So I'm going to go to that cell, H4. I'm going to lock that down because I'm going to move this down in a minute. Comma, table array. As I said, your table has to start from ID because I'm looking for ID. Your table has to start from, your first column has to be from ID column, which is very, very important, okay? So my table starts from ID. I'm gonna drag it all the way so it covers the entire database. So as you can see, my table array is A4 to D14. So that entire array is covered. And, you know, some people highlight the columns, which is completely fine. But if you want to do that, you can do. But I'm going to stick to that range because I want this to be very precise. Column gives you the same result, so that's fine. Right, so I've got my table array. What now I want is the column index. As I said, column index is the number from the first lookup from the first column of your table array is how much, well, it's how many places from the table that you want your value from, where you want your value from. So in this instance, we want first name. First name is second column from the ID column. So I'll put number 2. That's why I did that. So that's number 2. So what lookup? Range lookup essentially is whether you want it to be approximate match or exact match. To get approximate match, you can leave that as nothing. You can just close your bracket there. But approximate match will give you random results, and is not one you want to get to. Never use approximate match. I'll get into the only reason, watch the other video, because I'll get into the only reason why you would want to use approximate match. But for the sake of our VLOOKUP, we always use false, close bracket, or 0. I use mostly 0 because, you know, like I started spelling false and I spelled it wrong, and I don't like that being a reason why my VLOOKUP is wrong. I mean, you can spell false, but 0 is just a bit more shorter and it gives you the exact same result. So I'll put 0 there because that's how I use my VLOOKUP. And now if I press enter, it will give me that first name. So that ID is attached to Jonathan. Now, I can copy this formula down without creating it, creating a new one. So what I want now is the last name. And I can go back and count where that last name column is, right? So if that's my first column of the table array, 1, 2, 3. Last name is number 3. I'll put 3 there. That will give me the surname. Right. So now we want to find email address, right? So email address is number 4 on the list. And now you've got your VLOOKUP looking at that name and that ID, finding you the first name and the last name, as well as the email address. So that's it. That's all there is about VLOOKUP, really. There are some limitations to VLOOKUP that I want to show you quickly. VLOOKUP does not look anything to the left of you. So for instance, if we didn't get the ID, so you were not given the ID, you don't know what the ID is, and you want to find out what the ID is, right? So let's say we got given first name. So first name is Julie. You got given Julie. Now you want to find the last name, ID. You want to find ID, last name, and email address for Julie, right? So assuming there's only one Julie in place, and this is your data, we're going to find the last name. So let's start our VLOOKUP again. VLOOKUP. Your value now, your lookup value would now be Julie. So I'm going to lock this down. So don't forget to always lock yourselves down. The table array, which is very, very key, has to start from the item you're looking to match. It has to start from the first name. That's why we've done that. So in case you were wondering. Right, I've locked that down. Now I want to find the last name. So remember, our table is changed. So therefore, this now becomes 1, and my last name becomes 2, and then 3, because this is where my new value is, right? My new table match figure is that I'm looking for. So now let's try and get email address for this lady. Email address would then be in column 3, column index 3. Column index number is now 3, and then you've got email address. You notice we can't, limitation of VLOOKUP is that you can't go to the left of you. You can only go, once you start from the first column value match to your right, you can't look up left, anything left. In order to do that, we're going to be looking at something called index match. So stay tuned and watch out for that. Index match, and we're going to be looking at XLOOKUP. Watch out for those videos. That will show you how to go either ways, whether left or right. But VLOOKUP is quite limited because you can only go to the right of you, not to the left of you. In order to find the ID using a VLOOKUP, the only thing we have to do in this instance is just move this to the right of you. Sometimes it's a pain, but that's the only thing you have to do when you're using a VLOOKUP formula. But then you've got other issues. So the other issue is that if you copy this, so if that's 3, then this becomes 4. If that's 4, VLOOKUP will not work, right? Because you guessed it, it's outside of your range. Anything that's outside of your table range will give you that reference error number. So what we'll have to do now is go into a formula and make sure this range covers E. So make sure your range then covers that, and then your VLOOKUP would work. And then now you found out what the ID is, what your last name and first name, last name and email address for that lady. So that's it about that's all there is about VLOOKUP. I will be looking at XLOOKUP next, so make sure you stay tuned for that. If you haven't watched the other videos, make sure you go and watch them. But let's look at XLOOKUP now. Right.